Hi, I'm Aaron Cook, and on my team I had Danita Carter, Joseph Amonfo, and Andrew Campbell. And we chose to go with Module 5, Data Pre-Processing. So here's our showcase, and we'll show you a bit what we've learned. So we're going to start with the tool that we chose to work with for this module. Then we're going to go on to the evaluation of that tool that we chose, and then we'll talk about some potential data issues that you can address with this tool. And then lastly, we'll end up with a little demo on how we used it. So we decided to go with Trifactor Wrangler. This is offered as a free trial. You can get the free version, but you obviously can't have as many capabilities. But it's honestly a very, very useful, efficient tool. It's convenient as well. So it offers many, many things. So it starts with interactive exploration. And so when you import data, whether, like, let's say you import an Excel sheet, a CSV file, it'll create a flow for that project you're working on. And so it will list out the data prior to cleaning it, and then after it'll show you the finished product, which you can see on the right there. It kind of lists out just that flow chart for it, and so you're able to see what progress you've made. And when you upload the data, it automates visual representations for it, and so it will show you the data values. It'll show you graphs depending on what data you have. If there's either missing values or non-matching values, it'll list that as well. And this kind of allows for a more in-depth understanding of the data and what you're looking at. It also has predictive transformation, and so every selection that you make in your data set, let's say you click on a blank row, for example, it will suggest transformations for that data. And so if you can see on the picture on the right there under suggestions, we have a blank row selected, and it's suggesting that we delete it because there is a missing value there. And so it's assuming that there isn't a value and it doesn't need to be there. And so it's doing that automation and that intelligence to do that for you. And lastly, it offers very easy import and export of data sets. So again, you just do a simple spreadsheet file upload. So you just get a CSV file on your computer and you upload it. And then to export that data, if you want to save that once the changes have been made, it's just easy click and it downloads that final CSV file for you. So that's very, very efficient. And some of the potential data issues that this tool addresses, completeness. And so as we mentioned, it will clean data, maybe delete a column for you just to make the whole data set complete so there's no missing gaps. Consistency, let's say you have a state with the two abbreviations in all caps, the two letters. If there's some states missing or some listed in a different way, it can make that consistent and make that consistent overall the whole entire data sheet. Case sensitivity goes along with the same thing. It can make everything the same to make sure the whole sheet's consistent. Too much data, you can delete data, you can transform data, you can add data, you can do whatever you want, and so it's gonna allow you to get the set that you want to see. Human error, which is one of the most common issues. Human error, this automated suggestion can fix that, and it can recognize and point out mistakes that we may make and we may miss. And the wrong data types. So let's say that there is a column full of numbers, and then in one row there is a text field. So it will point that out, and it will suggest that you fix that, and most likely make it a 0 for null because it was a misprint. So those are the most common data issues, and now we're going to go on to the demo of our tool being used.
Hello, my name is Danita Carter, and I will be giving a brief demonstration on a data pre-processing tool, how you import data, how you can actually transform that data or clean it, or change it if necessary, and the various output formats that this tool offers. My group, which consists of Andrew Campbell, Aaron Cook, and Joseph Afari Amanfo, found this tool very easy to navigate. So let's get started. I've actually set up a file that I'm going to import that I gotten from, the file actually contains some sales data. So within this, it talks about calls, and it has a field here where the call number of calls is a decimal format. So within the tool, I'm going to modify that. I'm going to create within the tool a process that modifies that. Within the tool, I'm going to actually change the case of all of this field. So off to the tool. So to import, I'm going to import data. You can either drop and drag files here or choose a file from your desktop. And as you notice, with this tool, it has a limit of 100. So as it's going through the upload process, it's actually going through every column in the file and trying to reconcile what the data value or data type of that column is. So it has various data types, and I will actually show you those data types when we open. So once it's done processing that, we can either preview it here, but I'm going to skip that step. I'm going to go ahead and import it. So once I import, you're going to see my file shows up here, along with several other files that I've been working on as part of my research. So when I click on it, it's going to tell me some details about the files. It's going to give me a file size. It's going to tell me when it was created, how many columns, and how many data types it determined was within that file. So in order to move on, I'm going to say wrangle in a new flow. And what a flow is actually a step-through process where it's going to go through and identify the columns. It's going to let me see things. It's going to actually flag anything that it deems as an anomaly or things. It's actually, and with this, it's actually going to show you the distribution of the values within the field. So I found that pretty neat that it would do that. So in here, if you remember the number of calls, there were actually decimals in here. So what it does is it looks at patterns and tries to determine the differences from within those fields, any patterns that are maybe not conforming to what it needed to be. So first off, I'm going to show you within this field. So it determined this field was an integer. You know, an integer is a number. It can be a decimal or whatever, but I'm going to kind of click on this and show you the various fields that it actually has. So you'll see where it says it has a string, it has integers, it has a decimal, Boolean, and even more so, it can determine emails, phone numbers, credit card numbers, social security numbers, gender, and so forth. So it will actually look at your data and break it down and try to actually determine those fields. Now you can actually change those fields if you want, but I'm not going to do that here for sake of time. But if you notice, it has the mismatches, and it tells me it actually has 10 mismatches. And the way you can there's a couple different ways you can look for those. If you go through the file and you look, it will actually have all of them flagged in red. And because I know, but if you notice, here they are. So it's shading those, and it's showing that those are mismatched values. Now, in order to change those values or change the properties, there will be some suggestions that it might give you. Now, in this case, I don't want to delete the values. I actually just want to I want to round them up. So what I'm going to do is, instead of taking the suggestion, this is actually what they call a recipe. So it's a way to manipulate this actual field. So it's going to say keep rows. I want to actually keep the rows. But what I'm going to do is create a recipe. I'm going to actually tell it to round that number. So and you see it has the feature that it has that it tells you to round it. So I can say how many digits I want to keep or round the value with a specified number of decimal places. So I'm going to say 0 decimal places. So if you notice, now it comes back with the new columns called round total calls, and I see my new values that were actually rounded up. So that's my new recipe, and I'm going to add that Now I can actually call the column a new name, but for right now, I'm going to keep it so I can see what originally had transpired and what transpired next. So the next step I'm actually going to do is I'm going to just kind of manipulate data. Say for instance, we have these various fields. So there's different ways it's calling everything. So in order to conform, I can say I want to change all the Salt Lakes to SL, just briefly, just so it can conform. And I can actually change all of these values to be uppercase. So with that, there's two different ways I can do that. I'm going to add another recipe, which is another step in the process to run the job to actually create a file, create the output. But I can also come here and it's formatting text data, string data, and I can say convert to uppercase. And then a shortcut, you'll see where it says convert to uppercase, and I'm going to add that step. So now my recipe actually has two steps now. It goes and rounds the data from total columns up to a whole number with no decimal places, and it's going to convert everything in Office to be uppercase. And with that, you can actually preview those steps. So now I'm going to add another step to this, and I'm going to change, I'm going to do a replace. So I'm going to add another step, and I'm going to do a replace text or pattern. So it asks me what column. I'm going to say Office, and then it's going to find, and because that has, Salt Lake has a space in between. So as it's going through and I tell it to find, it previews and it shows me what exactly it's going to replace. So it gives me a preview of what it's going to look like, and it's going to be dropped and what it's going to look like. So I'm just going to change that to SF, and I'm going to add that step. So now you see my new column has SL in it. So that actually is showing me right now there's no new output. In order to get the file in the format, the clean file out, so I can actually manipulate it in the next modeling phase, I can actually run the job from here. And what it does, it's going to ask me, what do I want my output to be? My output could be a CSV file. It says no compression, single file with headers, with quotes, with delimiter, and then and it tells you what the delimiter is, or I can do a JSON. So I'm actually going to create it with a CSV file, and I'm going to run the job. And because this is a cloud app, it's actually going to queue it in the cloud, and it's running on their resources. So if you notice, it says in progress. So the job is finished. It went from queuing to in progress and completed. And once it's completed, you can actually see the finished data set. So in here, I'm going to go to data, and you can see where it changed the Salt Lake to SL. And now all my calls are going to be whole numbers. I created my new column, round total calls. So this would be my new data set. It's my demonstration of Trifactor Wrangler data preprocessing tool that will help you accomplish all your needs of your data preparation step of CRISP-DM.
So we appreciate you taking the time to watch our showcase. We hope that you've gained a better understanding of what data preprocessing is and how it's important, and how it can be done using many tools, one being Trifactor Wrangler.